I'm Van Sebastian here with my co-host S.A. Baz Collins for this week's Written on the Edge, Season 8, Episode 41, Friday interview. We'll be talking with Rick Herrick and specifically talking about his book, A Second Chance. Get to know our guest. Rick Herrick, PhD, a former tenured university professor and magazine editor, is the author of 6 published novels and 3 works of nonfiction. His musical play, Lighthouse Point, was performed as a fundraiser for the Martha's Vineyard Museum of 2013. Dr. Herrick is currently retired, living in Bluffton, South Carolina. He is married with 3 children and 7 grandchildren. Rick, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, where did the fire come? What was that spark to actually start writing and putting stories out into the world?
Okay, well, I've a PhD in political science, and yeah, so I've come a long way.
Or one might argue you were in the heart of Fantasyland. I mean, it could go either way.
I know exactly. What happened was I was we were living in the mountains of North Carolina, and I was teaching in Appalachian State, and my wife was a ski patroller there, and I got tired of teaching, and she wanted a bigger ski mountain. So our kids were in college or beyond, so we didn't need to be we had some freedom. So I left my university and I got a job in the mountains at this little community park, which was also a nature conservancy, and it was closed for 4 months in the winter. So that enabled us, my wife and I, to go to Colorado. So I told her, I said, Lynn, I'd be happy to go to Colorado, but I'm not going to be a lift-up. I've always wanted to try to write a novel. So she said, we'll do it. So that's what I did.
Nice. And now, several novels later, we're here to talk about A Second Chance.
Oh, yeah.
What would you like people to know about it before we dive into it? What was like the elevator pitch?
Well, in some ways, I'm a frustrated New Testament scholar. And I probably am in a real minority among Christians. Most Christians worship Jesus as a God, but they pay very little attention to his teachings. I kind of am the opposite. I don't think of him as a God too much, but I follow his teachings, or try to, as the guideposts of my life. And you cannot read the New Testament without getting the sense that he was inclusive. To me, that's his most important value. And so I kind of got this idea that if Jesus came back and he hired a gay man to be his messenger, that would communicate inclusiveness. So that's probably the main reason I wrote that little novel, A Second Chance.
And I mean, wasn't one of the iconic stories of Jesus's life that he dined with prostitutes and lepers, just to show that everyone was worthy of God's love?
Yes, that's the whole point. Exactly. And I think a lot of Christians need to hear that again and again and again. Yeah, exactly. And I also have these 2 wonderful friends, Jeff and Robert, and their partners, and I wanted to honor them. They've been friends of Lynn and me for our entire lives, and so that just provided me with a new opportunity to do that. And finally, one of my favorite movies is Oh God. I don't know if you remember that.
With George Burns, yeah.
Remember, God comes back and he hires John Denver to be his messenger. Well, that's kind of where this whole idea came from. So
Very nice. So how did you imagine Jesus for the modern world?
You mean what? How did I place him in the novel?
Yeah.
I just placed him as a 35-year-old a Palestinian Jew, and that was one of the fun things about it is, the contrast and how he kind of saw the world, and which enabled me to make some points about some things that I think needed to be changed. I think if Jesus came back, he would be kind of shocked at what's happened to his religion. And so that's kind of what I wanted to say.
Hmm. One of the points that I notice is that you have a big critique of the bigotry inherent in the religion. Is that something that your Jesus character slowly comes to, or does he face it head on?
He faces it head on, really. I think that was his intention all along to make to make a point about including. That is just one of the key pictures. It's hard to find the historical Jesus, but you find pictures in the New Testament.
Hmm.
And one of the clearest pictures is everyone is invited to his table to dine with him. And when you shared a meal in the first century in a hungry society, that was a big celebration. So he was just celebrating people who are different. And I think that's how we ought to live myself. So that's
Hmm.
why I wrote the novel.
Nice. So tell us about his messenger, the gay man.
Well, his name is Jonathan, and he was an architect, and he lives with Dr. George, who is a surgeon at Presbyterian Hospital in New York City, and he's kind of shocked that Jesus would would want him to be his messenger, and he doesn't claim to know much about Jesus's teachings, but Jesus kind of educates him. He's also I made him a kind of a great guitar player, and so he could also speak to people and perform for them. So that kind of gave him a second dimension. I don't know if that answers your question, but
It did. It told us exactly who he was, actually.
yeah.
I have a question in that you said he doesn't quite know his teachings. So is he portrayed initially as an atheist or an agnostic?
No, he is he's no, that's a good question. He's portrayed as someone who really has a sense of who God is, but just doesn't go to church very much.
Hmm.
He grew up in the Episcopal Church, and he's kind of left it, the church, although the Episcopal Church has been pretty progressive on the gay issue, but he kind of wasn't too intrigued with church. And then Jesus comes, and he's shocked that Jesus would, be interested in people who are gay, and I think that totally changes his view of who Jesus was, and Jesus is also friendly and funny, and so they become friends, and so he finally, somewhat reluctantly, agrees to be his messenger. And Jesus provides him with a little book that kind of, tells him about his message. So that's kind of how the whole thing starts.
The other element of the novel that we haven't discussed yet is the humor that you use to shed light on a lot of what's going on. Do you have an example you want to share with us?
Well, I'll tell you why I tried to make it funny. First of all, I wrote a musical, and I tried to make it funny. And I don't know if I succeeded or not, but when you have normal people who it's hard to be funny. When you create a zany situation that's kind of off the wall, it's so much easier. So that's one of the reasons why I did it that way. The other thing is, I wanted to increase the readership. I thought if I could make it funny, I could entice more people to read about my views about Christianity. And my views basically are that we really ought to try to follow this guy. We ought to try to follow his teachings and live like he did, and, be concerned about economic justice and be concerned about including people and that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what I did to try to make it humorous. But as I'm saying, when I had when you have Jesus confronting a fundamentalist minister in a Bible study class, it's easy to be funny. And so that's kind of what my thinking was along those lines.
Excellent. Is there anything about the novel that you'd like to share with folks that we didn't think to ask?
Gosh, you were really good.
Yeah, it's kind of like we've done this before, huh?
Yeah, you have. Yeah. I mean, it is funny, but the novel has an edge to it. And I think that a lot of reasonable people, if they kind of imagine Jesus coming back, he'd kind of be pretty pissed off with a lot of what he saw going on. And that's what, Jesus is a nice guy, but there's an edge to him in the novel, and he's kind of disgusted with a lot of what he sees.
Is it disgust, or is it more a pointed disappointment?
That is exactly what it is.
Because that's how I would see him be if he had any kind of feeling. It's not really disgust. It's like, you guys could do so much better kind of thing.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And he is disappointed that people have misunderstood what he wanted to say in the first century, and they have twisted it. And in the last chapter, the final supper they have together, he thanks them. He thanks all the people that have joined this movement to kind of spread his message. He thanks them for saving his religion, for bringing back the ideas that he thinks are important in terms of how we serve God and how we live with each other and all that kind of thing. And yes, he's not pissed off. He's just disappointed that he's been misunderstood. Yeah, that's a very good way of looking at it. So,
well, and I also have to commend you that, you did take the humor track, because often comedy disarms human beings.
yeah.
And I think if you approach it from that perspective, that's why comedians can instruct in many ways. It's also why I think as of late, they've been held to a higher standard of do better, because the low-hanging fruit is not societally accepted anymore. It's not a good thing in your comedy to punch down on people. I think people are more readily available and more accessible if you know how to make light of a tough topic, but you're being inclusive and bringing them in and making the audience part of that story and that learning process. So I can see how you could have gone the dark, dismal, oh my God, vengeful God or whatever, but you decided to take this track, much like Oh God. And I could also think of Heaven Can Wait was another one that dealt with heaven and in a comedic kind of way. But I think it's a good way to approach it, because it has that ability to disarm people, to have them bring down their barriers. So kudos to you for approaching it from that perspective, because I think you'll find, especially in the queer community who have pretty much left religion by and large, it will provide them with a means of access, because if they'll see that hopefully in your writing, they will see that it's disappointment, but he's finding a way to make it accessible so that it's not I'm beating you over the head with how dumb you've been. There is a way to access that small part of all of our humanity that allows us to learn while we're laughing, kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, you've really kind of helped me understand what I tried to do.
Well,
I
see,
mean,
I was
you're
over
right.
your shoulder talking to your muse.
We disarm people with humor,
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
there's no question. I mean, that's exactly what I kind of had in my mind to do. You're right.
Nice.
So
So, stepping out of the story you wrote, has there been any blowback on the book? I mean, I know you're kind of politically aware, so you might have seen some stuff going on in the government lately. Has anybody had any problems yet?
say that one more time.
Has there been any blowback against your book, getting pulled from libraries or anything like that?
Uh, Mostly I've had people have thought it was funny and they've enjoyed it, and
Good.
they've found it surprising. I did write a novel about Jesus called A Man Called Jesus, and this is a kind of a biographical novel. And I started out that novel in a rather zany way. Jesus is it's the Sabbath, and he's under a waterfall with his 8.5-month pregnant wife. And so that novel has received mixed reviews. One person on Amazon said, I read the first 3 pages and burned the book. But the point that I wanted to make was, in starting the novel that way, is that we know nothing about the first 30 years of Jesus's life. Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with his being baptized by John the Baptist at 30, and almost all Jews in the first century were married. So I don't know why people would find it so controversial, but people did. And again, a lot of people liked the novel. Jesus is a pretty neat guy. That's kind of my view of him. So I haven't, on this one, I haven't had really a lot of people. I kind of watch my reviews on Amazon, and they've been mostly positive, and people have liked the humor. So that's good. Yeah.
Good. So, what have you got next? Are you working on a next book? Are you doing a media tour for this one?
I'm not doing a media tour. I just got my last book published. It's called A Christian Approach to Political Decision Making. I'm a political scientist.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a whole new way of looking at Christian ethics. And I'm pretty excited about it. And I've got a pretty big publisher. So I've got my fingers crossed. And I kind of, yeah, right. I kind of find it easier to do the podcast route rather than the book tour. It's a lot less expensive. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you guys have been very generous, and you kind of need guests from time to time. So that's kind of how I'm selling a second chance. And some of my other books, I get people asking me to appear on their shows, and it's fun. I mean, and it's free. I just sit at home and talk to you guys, and you sell books for me. It couldn't be nicer.
Yeah, I've got the car warmed up. We're going to be heading out to one of the parking lots and be selling it out of the boot.
So, if folks want to learn more about you or learn more about your other novels, including the one you just mentioned, they should head to rickherrickauthor.com. Is that the best place?
Yeah, that's the best way.
All
And
right.
all my books are on Amazon, and they're all reviewed, so they can look at them, look at the reviews, and see if they want to purchase them. And most of them are short, so they're not tomes. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
No, I've got some of naivete.
Share them. Let's hear it. It's September, and you're our first who's offered words of naivete, so let's hear it.
Oh, no, I'm just teasing. But I tell you, I really appreciate you guys having me on. It was a real treat.
Well, we appreciate your level of scholarly looking at the world and putting out stories like this that help bring together communities that are currently very far apart. So
Yeah.
thank you, Rick. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Rick Herrick for his work and for being with us here today. We at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by any content creator. It just has to be a little queer. If you enjoy learning about new artists, hearing our thoughts on entertainment media, please like and subscribe, get the alerts for new episodes, join us on YouTube, follow us there. We're putting more and more out all the time. The show was produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen stations, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. Tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye now.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.